Have you ever listened to a podcast and thought, that was good, but I don't really feel anything new? This is something that I was wondering about my own podcasts. It's not that my show edit history is bad. I was just wondering if it's feeling a little predictable. Yes, the conversations were insightful, but they weren't really sparking that oh wow moment that sticks with you long after the episode ends. So on today's behind the scenes episode, I want to share with you one thing that's working well right now, one thing that I'm going to do differently moving forward, and one thing that I'm experimenting with right now. And then at the end, we will wrap up by answering a few questions from listeners of Edit History. Before I dive in, I would love to extend an invitation to you to join me inside one-to-one podcast coaching. This is where I help entrepreneurs and creators like you to build a differentiated and compelling podcast, one that truly matters. Inside one-to-one podcast coaching, we will work together to build a podcast content strategy and a body of work that resonates with your audience, differentiates your brand, and establishes your position in the industry. Think of me as your strategic podcast partner. If you're curious about what this could look like for you, let's hop on a discovery call. I would love to learn more about what you're creating, how a podcast fits into your larger, bigger picture goals, and map out a custom coaching plan that makes sense for where you're at. Sounds good? Awesome. You can book a discovery call at CherylLau.com/discovery. Again, the link is CherylLau.com/discovery. Now let's dive into this episode of Edit History. One of the most unexpected but super exciting things I've noticed about Edit History is how often people have an immediate, almost instinctive reaction when they hear about the show. So when I tell someone the premise of the show, specifically how we bring on successful entrepreneurs and creators to revisit old content, reflect on their growth, and challenge their past ideas, when I tell people about this show concept, the response is almost always, oh wow, that is such a cool concept. And after some more, chit chat and back and forth, usually what has been happening is that even without me prompting them, they will ask me, are you on Spotify or are you on YouTube? I need to go subscribe right now. And now that I've had some time to think about it, I can see that this reaction doesn't happen by accident. It happens because Edit History is designed to be instantly intriguing. And that's what I've realized. When your podcast concept is so unique and compelling, people don't need to be convinced to check it out. They want to check it out completely on their own accord. And this is where I see a big gap in the podcasting space. Most podcasts follow a formula that's been done 1,000 times, right? Guest-based shows will go something like this. Every week, I interview an expert to share their story, tips, and strategies for success in XYZ niche. And then for solo shows, the description will go something along the lines of, I share my own stories, tips, and strategies to help you succeed in XYZ area. And this approach might have worked in 2020, but today it's just not enough to stand out. If your show concept sounds like every other show in your niche or category, it's going to be a challenge to attract and retain listeners. A major reasons why a lot of podcasts will struggle to grow is because they just don't leave a strong enough first impression. Think about the last time you told someone about your show. Did they react with excitement, curiosity, and immediate interest? Or did they just smile, nod politely, and then move on to the next topic? Because for most podcasters, it is the latter, right? Because their show concept just isn't unique enough to capture attention instantly. But things will look a lot different when you have a show that feels fresh, different, and most importantly, memorable. Because even for the people who may never actually listen to Edit History, I'm confident that they're still going to remember it, right? Even if they're not my target audience, they will still remember that it was such a cool idea about it, and they will tell their friends about the show. And that is the sort of word of mouth marketing that's going to do a lot for my brand and reputation. So what we can extrapolate here is that when you have a compelling show concept, marketing your show becomes so much easier and lower lift because people are naturally drawn to it and they actually remember it enough to tell other people about it. So, If you want your podcast to grow, start asking yourself questions such as, does your show immediately spark curiosity? Does it make people think, I need to go check that out? Does it stand out from everyone else in your niche or category? Because when your show concept is inherently interesting, you're no longer fighting for attention, but instead you're naturally attracting it. And that makes all the difference. All right, now let's talk about one thing I'm going to do differently. So one of the things that I've been thinking about is how to lean into more of my researcher and academic qualities. So I realized that instead of just coming out with the perfect questions, I need to be interacting with the guest's work, their body of work, in a much deeper way before we even hit the record button. And this is because I want Edit's history to feel like a place where people uncover something new about themselves. And the thing is, great conversations don't come from just having the perfect questions, but there are times when it stems from having a deep understanding of the guest's journey. So here's what I'm changing. I'm going to start printing out the content from the guests. So whether it's newsletter articles that they've written before, or social media posts, or even a transcript of a past interview they've done, I'm going to print it out, highlight it, annotate it, underline key phrases, and make notes in the margins. And when we're actually recording, I'm going to whip out those notes and bring it into the conversation. Because here's the thing, when I read back their own words back to them, it forces more of a genuine reaction, right? Instead of the usual polished, rehearsed answers, they might go, oh, I haven't thought about it that way before. Or maybe, actually when I said that, what I really meant was, right? So this kind of like real-time clarification will make for a much richer conversation. I also want to be a lot more intentional about what we're building towards in each episode. So instead of front loading everything and laying out the biggest takeaways right at the start, I want to work towards like a moment of surprise. Like, what's the unexpected insight that we're discovering together? What's the shift that makes the listener sit up and think, oh, I wasn't expecting that. Right? And finally, I want to really dig deep into why the guest is doing what they do, why they made a specific choice, and what I personally appreciate about their work. Because whether or not they're famous, every guest has something that's deeply interesting about them. And my job is to find it. And then to take this even further, I'm thinking about introducing a new way to structure these conversations, a sort of like through line that carries across every episode. So right now, from my own observations as a podcast listener, a lot of shows have a solid concept or premise, but they don't necessarily take it to its fullest potential. So for me, when I review the first sets of episodes from Edit History, I do wonder where I could have pushed the boundaries further when it comes to the show concept. So I want to make sure that from now on, every part of the episode, from the questions to the format to even the visuals, tie into a bigger theme. So one idea that I'm marinating on is a sort of like structured timeline segment where we view the guest's journey through the following stages. First, the Stone Age, the early struggles. I want to go back to the beginning when the guest was figuring things out, following the so-called rules, and trying strategies that were supposed to work but didn't quite fit. We will explore the frustrations and challenges of that phase and revisit one piece of content from that time. What did they try that didn't quite click? What did they believe back then that has completely changed? So on and so forth. And then we will move on to the Renaissance, the breakthrough moments. This is where we will dive into the turning points, the moments where things started to come together and they begin to embrace their unique style. We'll talk about their aha moments and the first sparks of originality, and when they finally broke free from the usual path and start creating on their own terms. And then we'll move on to the present day and even predicting the future, right? Because even at the top of their game, these entrepreneurs and creators are still refining and evolving. So what's their focus right now? What are the skills that they're sharpening? And where do they see themselves heading next? And let's also talk about their industry. Where do they think it's going? And what are things that creators and entrepreneurs should be paying attention to? This structure will ideally help guide the conversation naturally while also making sure that we hit on key moments that matter. And another thing I want to mention is that I'm also practicing moving away from like a pure Q&A format and just making the episodes feel more like an in-the-moment exploration. So instead of just asking a question and waiting for a response, I want to just layer in more of my own perspectives and observations. So for example, if a guest shares a thought, instead of me just immediately moving on to the next question, I might say, "Oh, that's interesting because earlier you said X. How do you reconcile those two things?" Or maybe I'll say, "I noticed you didn't mention why, but it seems like that would have been a big factor. Was that intentional?" Right? So these small moments of curiosity will ideally help pull out those unexpected insights and keep the conversation more dynamic. Because ultimately, I don't want guests to just answer questions. I want them to re-examine and even challenge their past ideas. And that's what makes edit history different. It's not just about capturing a polished soundbite, but it's about stepping into a conversation where both of us are discovering something new. And at the end of the day, what excites me about edit history isn't just about looking back, but it's about the constant process of refining, questioning, and evolving. And as the host, I'm right there in that process as well. Every conversation will push me to sharpen my perspective, rethink my approach, and keep refining this show into its best version yet. All right, when it comes to one thing that I'm experimenting with, one of my current goals for Edit History is to bring on established entrepreneurs and creators, some of whom are very well known. And these are people who have been interviewed countless times already, who have already told their origin stories and have answered the same questions over and over again. So the question for me is, why would they say yes to coming onto Edit History? What makes this conversation worth their time? And while I'm still trying to answer these questions, what I will say for now is this. I'm not just inviting them to do another interview, but I want to invite them to re-examine, refine, and even challenge their own narrative. So for someone who might already have a massive body of work, a conversation on Edit's history isn't just another podcast appearance, but I want to show them that this is an opportunity to do one of the following things. So number one, extend their body of work. So instead of just rehashing past interviews, here they will explore an idea or evolution that they've never shared publicly before. An intellectual exercise that pushes their thinking forward. Number two, to see their own body of work through a new lens. By pulling up past content, whether it's an article they wrote, a viral post, or even a transcript from an old interview, I want to guide them through an edit history of their own ideas. What still resonates? What will they change today? And this level of reflection is honestly quite rare even for the best thinkers, right? And number three, be part of a show that does more than just talking. So Edit History is honestly about real-time discovery, right? And the best guests will leave the conversation thinking, "Oh my gosh, I did not expect to talk about that, but I'm glad I did." But here's the thing. In order to make this work, I myself need to step up my game, right? If I'm pitching a well-known guest, I can't just say, "Hey, I would love to have you on my podcast," but I really need to show them that this will be one of the most unique and meaningful conversations that they've had all year. So that means I need to find the angle that they've never talked about before, right? Before I reach out, I need to be doing deep research. I'm listening to past interviews, reading their writing, and studying their thought process, and making sure to not just ask the same questions, but to find the gaps. Right? What's a moment in their body of work that they've glossed over? What's a shift in their thinking that haven't yet been explored? And I also need to be bringing something to the table, right? I'm not just here to ask you, "Hey, tell me about your story," right? I'm here to say, "Hey, in your 2019 interview, you said X, but in a recent post, you said Y. I'm curious, how did you evolve your thinking between those two moments?" Right? Because when I can show that level of depth, that's when the guests realize, "Oh wow, like this isn't just an interview, like we are actually going to be exploring something new." And finally, making it worth their time, because high profile guests don't want more exposure anymore. They already have enough of that. But what they really want is meaningful conversations. And my job is to give them a reason to say yes. So whether that's the chance to articulate something that they've been thinking about, or challenge an old perspective, or create a piece of content that feels like a real contribution to their legacy, that is all going to be on me. So going forward, my pitching strategy needs to evolve, right? Instead of just sending out an invitation, I really need to make sure that the pitch feels like the beginning of the conversation in itself. And by doing so, I really hope that the guests can see the value of this interview, not just for me, but also for themselves. And I hope that for the right fit guests, this is a conversation they will not want to pass up on. All right, now let's answer some questions we got from you all. So we have 2 questions to unpack today. Let's dive right in. So the first question, actually, it's more like a comment. Someone said, you don't talk much about leaving law school or the PhD anymore. And this person is right. I haven't. So let's talk about the first one, quitting law school. So for some context, growing up, I was your typical overachieving straight A student. I collected scholarships, awards, and was laser focused on checking off all the boxes of success. And after university, I then got into law school in Hong Kong, and I even got a $100,000 Hong Kong dollar scholarship. And at the time, I really thought that becoming a lawyer was the best decision ever because it was prestigious, practical, impressive, and it would make my parents proud. So on paper, everything looked great. But when I started law school, I started thinking, oh, wait, like this may not actually have been the right decision, right? When I actually started my law internships, I was like, oh, like, this actually, I'm starting to really doubt like if this was the right direction for me professionally, right? So I started to think thoughts like, should I just stick it out and finish and then find a non-legal job? Or should I leave now and try another graduate program? Am I just being ungrateful? And the hardest thought that I was grappling with at the time was, what will my parents think? And I remember feeling really ashamed for even having those thoughts. But, now with hindsight, I can see that this was just the beginning of me maturing and actually using my brain to think for myself instead of just relying on blueprints and checklists to guide my decisions. And, back then, although I didn't have the language to articulate why I felt that becoming a lawyer wasn't the right path, I did have enough of an intuition to recognize that there were other careers that would be a much better fit. So even though I couldn't quite explain my reasoning in a succinct or articulate way at the time, I did know what my decision was. So during the first semester of my second year of law school, I submitted my letter of withdrawal and left law school. And my parents were absolutely furious. They said I was wasting opportunities. They said that I was always quitting things. And my mom even said that I needed to bring harmony back into the family because that's how disruptive it felt to them. And honestly, I understood their reaction. Because for many Asian immigrant parents, stability is everything. They value the hard skills and credentials because those are things that cannot be questioned, right? Many of them came to the US or Canada with language barriers and limited networks, but they could control how hard they worked. So technical mastery became their shield, and law school, becoming a lawyer, fit exactly that mold, right? So to them, quitting law school wasn't just disappointing, it was terrifying. And I carried that guilt for a while. But looking back, I now know that leaving law school was one of the best decisions I've made. Now, that said, I do worry sometimes about how my story is perceived. I'm not saying, oh, just do what you want and forget what your parents think. Like, that's not what I'm advocating for at all, right? I'm not saying be ungrateful, but what I'm saying is there will be times in your life when your dreams don't align with your parents' dreams for you. And that doesn't make anyone wrong. It just means that you have a decision to make. Are you willing to take full responsibility for your path, even if no one gets it? Even if no one supports you? Because here's the truth. It's not other people's job to believe in your goals. That's your job. You have to keep your own promises. You have to have your own back, even if it gets hard, lonely, or even when you can't see the results right now, right? So for me, after quitting law school, I spent the next few years just showing up for my own path, for my own self. I got a full-time research job. I tried out a few part-time gigs, and I even applied for a PhD on my own terms. And eventually I started my business. Now, my parents didn't really understand this whole business thing that I was building. They're not on social media and they were not familiar with coaching or podcasting, but they saw me working. They saw me keep my word. They saw me never ask for financial or emotional support, even when things got hard. And over time, their view of me changed. So fast forward to a few years later when I quit my PhD to move to Singapore and marry my now husband, they were fully supportive because they trusted me. And that was in stark contrast to when I was quitting law school. And, since then, they've even said that, they're proud of me. And if you have Asian immigrant parents, you know that having your parents tell you that they're proud of you, like, it hits different, right? But it honestly did take years of consistency and self-leadership and hard work for me to get to where I am today with my parents. And what I've learned is this. My decisions are not a rejection of my parents. My dreams don't mean that I'm selfish or ungrateful, and different values don't mean broken family relationships. Yes, we may have had different visions for my life and career, but that doesn't mean I have to give up on my relationship with my parents. If in fact, we have built a much deeper, more honest relationship over the years, a relationship where their love for me isn't conditional on me following their version of success. So, to anyone who might resonate with my story, I want to leave you with this, especially if you're currently at a crossroads in your life or career. Number one, sometimes creating your own definition of success is not what others expect or want from you. So that means you have to stand firm when pursuing what you truly believe in and always take full responsibility for your decisions and actions. Number two, it is okay if people don't support you in the beginning. Stay committed to your vision and goals. And number three, ultimately, creating your own version of success is a choice you have to make. There is no right or wrong. Just make a decision and keep moving forward. All right, that's the first question. Now let's move on to the second question. The second question is, why did you choose to start a podcast specifically? Okay, so my answer is pretty simple. I believe that all of us are searching for something or someone that helps us believe that what we really want is actually possible, right? I think we all carry a vision of our future self, like a version of us that is sparkling. But often what we're missing is the audacity to actually believe in our dreams in the first place, and also the courage to do something about it. And for me, once I found that courage to take the first step forward and pave my own path, I was able to change the trajectory of my life, and naturally, I want to help others do the same, right? But I didn't get here alone. Others went before me. They took the bold steps, shared their stories, and showed me what was possible. Because of them, I've been able to build belief in myself. Their transparency gave me permission and inspiration that I needed to actually take action. So back in 2018, when I made the decision to quit law school, I was completely lost, right? I was unsure of myself, unsure of my decisions, and had no clue what was next. And around that time, I randomly came across an Instagram caption, an Instagram post on my discovery feed that honestly, it just stopped me from my tracks. It spoke to me so deeply that I had to continue reading more from this person. And this person, her name is Vanessa Lau. So at the time, Vanessa had just left her corporate job to start her own business and YouTube channel. And since then, she's gone on to build an 8-figure online education business. And she's pivoted to launching a new company called Super Boba, and has grown a wildly successful YouTube channel that currently has over 900,000 subscribers. But what struck me the most was actually the timing. That one post, that one caption, at that moment gave me courage when I felt like I had none. It felt like a spark. And from that spark, I was able to take action and take control over my decisions and hence the trajectory of my path. And Vanessa was a complete stranger at the time, right? But because she has showed up and shared her story through her content, she helped me start believing in myself too. Because of her content, I started to find that sparkle in myself. And that's when I realized, oh my goodness, our stories, our lived experience, and our perspectives, when we can create content from that, it can help others, right? And sometimes in ways that we can't even predict. There are people out there whose lives will completely change because we showed up to share our story, our voice, and our ideas. Our content might just be the spark that helps someone else take that courageous first step. And that's why I started creating content in early 2019. That's why I launched my podcast in 2020, because I've seen firsthand how powerful it can be when someone chooses to share what they know, what they've lived through, and what they believe in. And that is why to this day, I continue to podcast, because I just cannot unsee the impact of content. And for me personally, podcasting is the vehicle that I want to create that impact and carry it forward for someone else. Before we wrap up, if you're ready to build a podcast that stands out and truly matters, I would love to work with you inside one-to-one podcast coaching. Together, we will build a podcast content strategy that resonates, differentiates, and positions you as a leader in your space. If you're curious about what this could look like for you, let's chat. You can book a discovery call at CherylLau.com/discovery, and I'm really excited to hear about your vision, your goals, and explore how we can make it happen. Anyways, that's it for today. Thank you for tuning into Edit History, and I'll see you all in the next one. Sounds good? Awesome. Let's get to work.